The Texans have been as active as anybody, almost more than anybody, in free agency, and yet don't have any big splash signings. The biggest guys of note would be Sheldon Rankins, Jimmy Ward, Shaq Mason, Robert Woods, Case Keenum, and I'm going to say this, Scott Quesenberry, the center, not for quality, but just for notability. And if we were to summarize all of the main guys, the biggest thing that stands out and the people have noticed is, hey, much like the last 2 years, this is a slew of 1 and 2 year deals. The point I would make that distinguishes these guys is that they are a step above some of the 1 and 2 year deals that the Texans have signed in the last couple of years. I think that this is a step towards being a more competitive team, yet without hamstringing yourself 2 and 3 years from now in free agency, when ideally the team will be a better overall team. And then you can maybe swing for the home run with big name free agents. And then also when you're starting to re-sign some of these younger draft picks or keeping space open for those guys, I'm okay with it so far. I think the guys that they've added, the guys that I just mentioned, plus some of the other guys that aren't so notable, are going to lead to an overall higher quality and caliber of player this season. Are they championship caliber? Probably not, unless some of these draft picks really hit home runs. But overall, I think you're going to have more depth throughout. And I don't think you're going to enter the draft with as many high need situations where you got to really hope for a rookie to hit if the Texans are going to improve this year. To start with, the guy I haven't talked about in the most recent signing, Sheldon Rankins. So Sheldon Rankins is a fun player. He's the kind of player I really like and admire, for one, just because he's 6'1". He's undersized, and he has to make up for that with a combination of explosiveness, speed, and then just flat out tenacity. So whether you want to call him a grinder, a lunch pail guy, whatever it might be, when he's healthy and playing well, and you could argue that I think he played a lot more like his quintessential self this year than he did in the 2 previous years. And as he's getting up here in years, I think that explains why he hasn't gotten a longer term, bigger term deal. But he also, kind of like Aaron Donald, Aaron Donald's 6', 6'1". Aaron Donald makes up for it by being freakishly explosive, freakishly strong, freakishly athletic. Rankins isn't quite that freak level guy. So I've been saying he's like Aaron Donald, only less so. So he's going to provide pressure from the middle. He's going to make a lot of tackles. I think he can anchor in versus the run. And unlike a lot of Tampa 2 Lovie Smith style defenses, this is a guy that actually cares about playing the run. He's not just a pass rusher getting upfield. Alongside Malik Collins, these guys should provide some pressure up the middle. These guys should make it a lot easier for the guys behind him. You add that to Jerry Hughes on the edge and some of the other guys that are already there, and perhaps a rookie, perhaps a Will Anderson, who knows? But I'm excited about the potential for pass rush so far, with Sheldon Rankins being a good addition to that, but not one that's going to kill you in the long term. Jimmy Ward, when we talk about versatility, we used to think that was a dirty word because Bill O'Brien sometimes would try to shoehorn guys into versatility. Say, oh, okay, if we take this offensive lineman and we play him at left guard and he played at right tackle and then he can play at left tackle, he'll show versatility in his ability to be bad at all three of those positions. Jimmy Ward's the opposite. Jimmy Ward is very, very capable as a free safety and still very, very capable as a slot corner. I'm guessing his plan and the Texans' plan is to play him predominantly at safety alongside Jalen Petrie. I think he's going to be a great, great influence on Jalen Petrie, on Derek Stingley, and all the rest of those guys. And I think he's still got a lot of juice left in his tank. So this is a good signing by the Texans. And I think one that might end up being the biggest bang for the buck. Just a 2-year deal for Jimmy Ward, $14 million, $15 million on 2 years. Shaq Mason. Okay. We talk about, okay, here's another theme now. Defensive and offensive linemen the Texans have signed in free agency who are only 6'1". It's somewhat uncommon for a defensive lineman in the NFL to be 6'1". It's very uncommon for an offensive lineman to be 6'1", and yet that's what Shaq Mason is. And I would tell you this, a short offensive lineman, if he knows how to make up for the height, is a pain in the butt to go against because he gets up underneath you. Like he gets leverage. He's like Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was short, but he would get up inside guys and just crush them with power. Shaq Mason has that ability. They brought him to Tampa at the behest of Tom Brady, who needed some help on the offensive line last year. Shaq Mason had started his career off in New England. They brought him in to help out Tom Brady last year. He played well. He's known more as a run blocker, but I think last year he played perhaps arguably better as a pass blocker than a run blocker. The Tampa scheme and just the injuries and the guys they had available, I think might have factored into some of that. But with this Texans team who really, really wants to be able to run the ball better, there's nothing that helps out a rookie quarterback as much as, well, two things. I would say a run game and then a good defense. And a lot of the notable signings have been on that side of things, because even when you go to wide receiver, I would say Robert Woods past his prime. I don't think Robert Woods is or should be expected to be a huge impact player this year for the Texans, but he's a veteran player who run blocks very, very well. I'd say he might still be a top 5, top 10 blocking wide receiver in the NFL. And you might say, like, all right, what is this? Are we back to the Kevin Walter days? Yeah, I love Kevin Walter, because these coaches in the Kubshanistani system, they really do care about it. It's not just lip service. It's not something they say like where you would say, well, that guy's a team leader, or he's a good guy. The reason they love run blocking wide receivers is that Texans, or well, I should say like Kyle Shanahan type coaches, they want to lead the league in big runs. How do you get big runs? It's not just blocking on the offensive line. It's not just blocking linebackers. It's blocking all 3 levels of the defense. And to get that third level, you need wide receivers that are really trying to root guys out downfield and spring Dameon Pierce for a 20, 25, 30-yard play without him having to break 8 tackles along the way to get there. So I like Robert Woods for that reason. Case Keenum. Somebody this morning said that they would rather, one of our listeners on the radio show said they would rather have had, who'd they say? Oh, Gardner Minshew than Case Keenum. And I get that. I understand. Note, though, that Case Keenum has started about 3 times as many games in the NFL as Gardner Minshew. Case Keenum has a better win-loss percentage in the NFL. I think Case Keenum, when things were really good in Minnesota, Case wasn't the driving force in 2017 behind Minnesota winning 13, 14 games, but he certainly was a good caretaker of a team that ran the ball really, really well, had a very good defense, also had Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs, an increasingly disgruntled Stephon Diggs, obviously, but still a Stephon Diggs nonetheless. Case did a great job there. And look, this Texans offense isn't going to have that same caliber of talent overall that the Minnesota Vikings did in 2017, but Case has been in a lot of different systems. We know he's the consummate professional. He's old in a good way. Remember, he spent 6 years at the University of Houston. I don't think that this is just some sentimentality play. I think that Case, in a lot of ways, both in experience and in temperament, is the ideal guy to be a bridge quarterback. And then also, I think it's a good deal for Case. I think Case might get a chance to play a good amount depending on who they draft, depending on how slow or careful they want to be with it. I think either of the top 2 guys at the top, CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, I would lean towards them playing very, very early, if not week 1. I'd be disappointed if they didn't, because I think they might not be as far along as you think they are via their scouting report. But I think Case is the right presence there. Gardner Minshew, I like Gardner Minshew. I don't want to say he's immature because he's got a colorful personality, but I don't think he's at the same level of maturity as Case Keenum. So kind of remember Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor was perfect in a lot of ways, and unfortunately he was in a rough situation. But he was going he was playing when Deshaun Watson was the 3rd or 4th string quarterback on the roster technically, and Tyrod Taylor had to stand up there and ask questions about it, while also helping out and being a good example for Davis Mills. So I'm okay with Case Keenum. Scott Quesenberry, I'm going to mention for this reason. He is right now the presumed starting center. He had a rough year last year. He was thrust into action when Justin Britt went AWOL basically early on in the season. I thought he had some good stretches of play, but the bad stretches were really bad. And this is probably the most disappointing part of free agency so far for the Texans, is that they weren't able to land any of the top centers, and there weren't like big name centers on there. This would have been the one position where I'd have been cool overpaying for a veteran center, because you're probably going to be playing a rookie quarterback. and a rookie quarterback and a rookie center. That's a lot to learn, in one fell swoop between those two positions. Ben Jones is out there. I've talked to you guys a little bit about him. He had 3 concussions this past season. He's in his 30s. I don't know if this is exactly what Ben Jones wants to be doing anymore. I have zero clue. I just know that, look, brain injuries are harder to recover from the older you get, or there's more, statistically, there's a greater challenge of long-term damage the older you get. And clearly you get up to that age. I don't know what his family situation is. He's probably got kids by now. You start thinking about things a lot, and he's had a good career. He was playing still at a high level, I think, this past season. It's just a matter of where his head is. If he wants to come back and play, I think he would be a very, very good choice. He's familiar with this system. He, I think, would be a great guy to come in and maybe only expect to pay 1 or 2 years. If there was a rookie center that the Texans really liked, they could draft him and maybe get him to start his rookie year under the tutelage, or at least having the example of Ben. I don't like to, automatically label the veteran guys tutors. Some guys are good at it. Some guys aren't. Some don't want to be bothered. Some are over the top, helpful. And I think Ben might end up being that guy, but you just never know. And I don't think it should ever be something that you task somebody with, because it's kind of like teaching, right? You either got it or you don't. You're either naturally inclined to be a teacher, or you're a miserable teacher. You're just really unhappy all the time because, damn it, all you want to do is coach football, but they're making you teach history too. These stupid little kids, they don't care. Anyway, so it might have been autobiographically based. So the Scott Quesenberry dynamic is one that, I guess we should also hold out hope that maybe Scott Quesenberry just needed a year and ends up coming back a lot better this year. As well as, I'll just go ahead and go over the other signings. So Noah Brown, 1-year deal, another wide receiver on a pretty reasonable contract, who's also a very good run blocker. So there you have it. I mean, there's a theme there, certainly. Tight end / fullback, Andrew Beck. So there will be some competition. This is a team now that has 2 fullbacks, including Troy Harrison, on the roster. Andrew Beck, a potential H-back type of guy, and doesn't have an exorbitant contract, 2 years, $6.75 million, $4 million guaranteed. He'll be competing for playing time. I'd be surprised if he doesn't make the team. Chase Winovich, whatever. He's a defensive end that got a lot of publicity early on in New England, made some impact plays. I almost felt like maybe Belichick didn't like the fact that this long-haired blonde kid got more attention than the Patriots usually like guys to get. Who told the story earlier this week, at least I saw it earlier this week, was Rob Gronkowski, talking about when he got drafted by the Patriots. He was at the draft. He was the first guy, he said, that had actually gotten drafted in the second round at the draft, because he was the first guy to go that slid that far. And he was celebrating like you'd expect a Gronkowski to, up on stage. And apparently the Patriots called him and told him to knock it off. So he said he was getting yelled at like within seconds of being drafted by the Patriots. That's just the way that Bill Belichick was running things. So Chase Winovich, 2 years with the Patriots, 1 year with the Browns, if I'm not mistaken, was banged up somewhat. There's upside there, and lunch pail grinder, all that good stuff. Sheldon Rankins, we talked about. Hassan Ridgeway, 1-year deal as a defensive tackle who had played in the 49ers. So he's familiar with the system. I think this guy's a plugger type. He's not going to put up huge stats, but probably always where he's supposed to be. Linebackers can depend on him to be playing his technique properly. I think D'Amico probably just likes the guy. I don't know how much upside Hassan Ridgeway really has. I feel like at least part of his upside is that he sounds a little bit like Hassan Reddick. And so there's a natural tendency to think like, oh, Hassan Reddick, huh? Whew. Even though they're not related as far as I know one little bit. MJ Stewart, he re-signed. Very good special teams player for the Texans. So probably missed a couple that were signed today. But in a nutshell, that's it. I think so far what you have to lean on as a Texans fan is the fact that I've read a couple studies this week about teams that have done the best in free agency over the past decade. The Patriots are one of them. The vast majority of that included the time that Nick Caserio was there. And it was done in somewhat of a similar fashion to what the Texans are doing right now. The Patriots got a lot of value out of guys who were not exorbitantly paid. And they stretched a few more times. Obviously, they were a much more competitive team for that entire duration, but they played it very close to the vest, very conservatively, and it paid off for them. I think that Casario's thinking that same thing right now. I think he'll stretch the envelope as the team gets better, but he's always going to be looking for value. The problem with free agency is the person who wins is by definition overpaying. Like whatever the market value is for a player in free agency, you've got to win that auction. So whatever the average is that most people would want to pay for that player, you got to go above and beyond to land that player. So you want to be careful with it, as opposed to the draft, which is a little bit more of a skill game. You're at your spot. There's other people that can make decisions one spot above you, one spot below you, and on and on and on. And hopefully over time you make better decisions. Likewise on non-name brand free agents, making the right decisions about guys that fit your team, guys that fit your timeline, all of that. That's what we're kind of crossing our fingers right now and hoping that Caserio is really good at that and was responsible for a lot of the success in New England. Although we are no longer Patriots South. We are 49ers Gulf Coast. And for the moment, we're cool with that. All right, everybody, have a great weekend. I'll try to do one or two videos this weekend as well.